All right, here we go. More on Subpart S, 1910 to 332, training. This is a pretty short section standard, and so let's get to it and get it taken care of here. Let me get these things to work. All right, scope. The training requirements contained in this section apply to employees who face a risk of electric shock that is not reduced to a safe level by the electrical installation requirements of 1910.303 and 1910.308. Note, employees in occupations listed in table S4 face such a risk and are required to be trained. Other employees who also may reasonably be expected to face comparable risk of injury due to electric shock or other electrical hazards must also be trained. This is kind of they put a list of things, and then they say anybody else too. I don't know why they bother with the list, but oh well, that's social for you. So anyhow, so they're saying that they're just giving the list as more like these people have to be trained, but everybody else too that has the same, that has any risk. It's who you would train anyhow, right? Content of training: practices addressed in this standard period. Employees shall be trained in and familiar with the safety-related work practice required by 1910.331 through 335 that pertain to their respective job assignments. Makes sense. Additional requirements for unqualified persons. Employees who are covered by paragraph A of this section, but who are not qualified persons, shall also be trained in and familiar with any electrically related safe practices not specifically addressed by 1910.331 to 335, but which are necessary for their safety. Okay, here's what the unqualified person, again, I guess is the only place in OSHA where I've seen this requirements for unqualified people, but there it is. And so even if they're not qualified, they need to be trained and any electrically related safety practices not specifically addressed, which are necessary for their safety. Well, I guess somebody's got to say it. So as you said it. Additional requirements for qualified persons. Qualified persons, that is those permitted to work on or near exposed energized parts, shall at a minimum be trained in and familiar with the following: the skills and techniques necessary to distinguish exposed live parts from other parts of electrical equipment. So they got to know, first of all, what to look for in live parts, and then how to tell if they're live parts. Now you use a meter, that's how you tell it, but you got to know what to look for though. The skills and techniques necessary to determine the nominal voltage of exposed live parts. And that's where your meter comes in, because I don't think there's any other way to do that. And the clearance distances specified in 1910.333C and the corresponding voltages to which the qualified person will be exposed. Note 1, for the purpose of 1910.331 through 335, a person must have the training required by paragraph B3 of this section in order to be considered a qualified person. And B3 was what we're on right now. Qualified persons whose work on energized equipment involves either direct contact or contact by means of tools or materials must also have the training needed to meet the C2 here. 1910.33C2, which we haven't even covered yet. So either direct contact, so that means your hand touches it, or means of tools or materials. So it could be a tool or even something you're a part putting in. Type of training. The training required by this section shall be of the classroom or on the job type. The degree of training provided shall be determined by the risk to the employee. If that's not a broad standard, I don't know what is. Let's see, either it should be the classroom or on the job type. Most training usually is a combination. Some classroom, some on the job, in my opinion, anyhow. So they're saying it can be either one. The degree of training provided shall be determined by the risk to the employee. Pretty much covers everything, doesn't it? All right, this is their table. Typical occupational categories of employees facing a higher than normal risk of electrical accident. Occupation, blue-collar supervisors, electrical and electronic engineers, electrical and electronic equipment assemblers, electrical and electronic technicians, electricians. I notice there's no one after electricians. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Industrial machine operators, material handling equipment operators. That's unusual in there. What's material handling equipment operator? Be forklift drivers, that type of thing. That's material handling equipment. And it doesn't say powered or non-powered. So I guess somebody that operates a hand pallet jack too. I mean, that's a pretty broad category. Mechanics and repairers. That's a good inclusive for that. Painters, for some reason, painters. I don't know why that. Riggers and roustabouts. Yeah, they get involved in a whole lot of stuff. Stationary engineers and welders. So note, footwork 1, workers in these groups do not need to be trained if their work or the work of those they supervise does not bring them or the employees they supervise close enough to expose parts of electric circuits operating at 50 volts or more to ground for a hazard to exist. So this is kind of unusual because you got a footnote to the majority of those instead of having they just a few of them. So anyhow, electricians and welders, though, need to be trained in. There are no exceptions there. But the other people, if their work doesn't, those are those in those other, the ones with the one after it, and those groups don't need to be trained if their work or the work of those they supervise does not bring them or the employees they supervise close enough to expose parts of electric circuits operating at 50 volts or more, close to ground for a hazard to exist. So that is a very short standard. And well, the reason why it's short is it doesn't get real specific. It's just real big, broad categories, right? You got to train all these people, and you got to train them in anything that might hurt them. And that's what you want to train people in anyhow. So it's good to be. That's a good way to be safe.